Back now with Bill Gaines, the founder of Mad Magazine. Before Mad, you were involved with horror magazines. And some of them, I guess, were pretty grisly. People holding up the severed heads on the cover and blood dripping and whatnot. And some people in high places were concerned about that.
Yes, we published the best horror, science fiction, and suspense comics around. To show how good they are, they're now on home box. They're beautifully, thank you. All those old stories.
Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt.
Vault of Horror.
Well, these were the titles. Tales from the Crypt is the title of the TV series, no matter what stick of them. But there were Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and Horn of Fear.
So in any case, a subcommittee is convened to investigate juvenile delinquency. And part of this investigation, and it must be kept in mind, this is with the McCarthy era.
It was a little after. Oh, the era, yes.
Yeah. Well, in any case, they're looking into juvenile delinquency, and they're concerned enough about the horror magazine industry to call you as a witness. What do you recall about the exchange?
Well, first I read a statement, which I was up all night writing with Lyle Stewart, my friend, and I went there and read the statement, and then they questioned me. And it wasn't just horror comics. They really were after all comics, virtually all comics. But mine were the best or the worst, depending on how you look at it, of all the comics. And so I guess I was the star witness.
I am a comic magazine publisher. My group is known as EC, Entertaining Comics. I am here as a voluntary witness. I asked for and was given this chance to be heard. I publish horror comics. I was the first publisher in these United States to publish horror comics. I'm responsible. I started them. Some may not like them. That's a matter of personal taste. It would be just as difficult to explain the harmless thrill of a horror story to a Dr. Wortham as it would be to explain the sublimity of love to a frigid old maid. What are we afraid of? Are we afraid of our own children? Do we forget that they are citizens too, and entitled to the essential freedom to read? Or do we think our children so evil, so vicious, simple-minded, that it takes but a magazine story of murder to set them to murder, of robbery to set them to robbery?
The contention was that almost all comics, lead to juvenile delinquency. They're bad for the children. They came up with things like it's bad for their eyes, which wasn't true because most of the lettering was very well done by professionals. They were just together. They did a good job because I ultimately had to drop all of my magazines and put out a so-called clean line of comics, which bombed and never,
Did they have a point, though, at least in part? Did they have a point? If there were episodes about cannibalism or whatever, might that have had some sort of negative effect on impressionable young minds?
I have never believed that. I still don't believe it. The stuff that they have in movies and television today is so much worse than anything I ever put out, and I can't see that that ever harmed anybody either. Kids love horror. They love gore. They love all these dreadful things. I have a grandson who just eats this stuff up, and he's about 5 years old, and all he can do is wait for the reprints of my comics because he loves them.
Some of the exchange didn't go so well for you. In parts of it, you were brilliant and eloquent and effective. Then there was this. One of the investigators said to you, you don't think a child can in any way, shape, or manner be hurt by anything the child reads or sees, and you respond, I don't believe so. Were things going downhill for you there? Should you have given a little ground and said, well, yeah, sure, but not framed the way we frame it? Wouldn't that maybe have been a better answer?
Well, let me tell you what happened there. I was on Dexedrine. Dexedrine is was a pill that you take to lose weight. But a side effect is it keeps you up. And since I had to be up all night writing that opening speech with Lyle Stewart, I had Dexedrine. And I still had it in me when I started the testimony.
Was this a prescription amount, or was it outside the limits?
Oh, no, it was prescription amount for diets, but I was using it to stay up with. I was using it as for a side effect at this point. And while I was giving the testimony, the pills wore off. And it is quite true. If you read the last hour of the testimony, they were beating the hell out of me, and I was so sluggish I couldn't beat back because I was sleeping.
So the tide turned in their favor.
Yeah. I've always said, I don't think I ever told this before, but the reason I got it difficult for me later on is because my Dexedrine wore off. And it left me very tired.
It's like a comic book scenario, come think of it. You know, the effects of tonight wears off right in the universe, I guess. With Bill Gaines, the founder and still publisher of Mad Magazine, where did the notion of asking readers or potential readers, are you a red dupe, come from?
Well, I wasn't asking them. I was suggesting that people who were against comics were red dupes. And this came about in a curious way. I had a friend who used to have fun whenever he'd come across somebody on a street making a speech. He would sit and listen or stand and listen a while, and if the guy were a leftist, he'd start calling him a fascist. And if he were rightist, he'd call him a communist. And this really upset them, because whatever they thought they were, they certainly didn't want to be what he called them because they were the other one. And he told me this story. I thought it was so funny that when I was attacked by all these people, and I was really under attack by a lot of newspapers, magazines, distributors, legislators, on the kind of comics I put out back in the 50s, I thought it would be fun. First of all, I considered anybody who didn't like my comics fascist. So I called them communists. I figured that will really upset them. That was the whole point of it. People who don't like comics are red dupes. It was just nonsense. But it survived. Everybody asked about it.
Let's talk a little bit about your father. He was in the comic book business himself, right?
Well, he more or less started it. He had been in the advertising business, and somewhere along the line, he was packaging 8, 16, maybe 32-page comic books for advertisers. For example, he put together a book for Buster Brown, the shoe company, and he distributed it to them so that they could give a comic book away to every kid who came in for a pair of shoes. Or he did a whole Skippy book. That's an old syndicated feature by Percy Crosby. He did a Skippy book, 32 pages, I think maybe 64, for Pepsodent toothpaste. And if you sent in a dime and a Pepsodent label, you'd get a comic. And one day, he had the inspiration of putting 10-cent labels on these and sticking them on a newsstand, and they sold out very quickly. So he took the idea to Delacorte at Dell Comics, and sold him on the idea of coming out with the first comic book, which was called Famous Funnies. And the rest is history.
Your father was an eccentric, to put it mildly, right? He had some strange aspects to his personality.
I would say so.
He was a conspicuously generous guy, right? There's a passage in one of your books where he apparently resembled Bert Lahr.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did he really resemble him that closely?
He resembled him, and that was a very funny thing.
So what happened?
Well, he was walking down the street. Bert Lahr was a big star in a musical called Burlesque at that moment on Broadway, and some outsiders was, Mr. Lahr, we can't get tickets to your show. Is there anyone can help us? And he said, okay, what name, what hotel you in? And he got a pair of tickets for Best, and he sent them up with the Bert Lahr. And probably to this day, if they're still alive, they think Bert Lahr gave them those tickets.
But he never felt that you'd do all that well, which is kind of ironic because you more or less followed the steps, but he didn't think you'd do so well.
Well, to him, I was a bum. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't fix fuses. I just was not much good around the house, and I wasn't much good doing anything, and I was a hopeless bum. So, you know, I've always wished he could have seen what happened after he was killed, but he never did, of course.
Do you think he would have approved of the type of comic book work you did?
No. He was out for clean comics, and he would have been very disapproving of my horror comics. Probably would have enjoyed Mad.
Our thanks to Bill Gaines, the founder and publisher of Mad Magazine. You think Mad will still be going strong into the next century?
Boy, I sure hope so. I have an incredibly talented staff, and I see no reason why it won't be.
So Mad may not stop, but we have to. Our time's up. See you later.